Hello, this is James Graff with Advisors Mortgage Group, and I'm bringing you another Mortgage Minute. This will take more than a minute. We're going to discuss the main stories of the day. The benefits lapse amid a record economic collapse. I'd like to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the second quarter 2020 gross domestic product decrease being the largest in historical record. You have to go back more than 150 years to even see, because there's no data about the GDP before 150 years ago. 1875, they began doing data. That's almost 150 years. This is the worst quarter in the history, and not recent history, since 150 years ago. Worst quarter. If you annualize it, it's down 32.7%. They're expecting it to be down close to 35%. 34.7% was the expectation. Anyway, that's the economic collapse we're talking about, record economic. The benefits are lapsing. This is, according to many, this is a mistake. I know Paul Krugman talks about this being a mistake. Several other economists who I follow think this is a major blunder. Now is the time to go into debt, not in high times, not when the economy is doing well. When the economy is doing well, you stave off going into deficits and debt. Anyway, and honestly, I've finally come to the conclusion that deficits don't really matter if you hold the world's currency. US dollar is what's preventing our interest rates probably from going negative. Will we always have the world currency? US dollars? I hope so. I certainly hope so. I worry. Anyway, moving on. That's my editorialization already. I'm going to stop opinionating, or whatever I'm doing. Sorry. Giving my opinion. I'm going to read to you what other people are thinking and saying. Benefits lapse amid a record economic collapse. What happened? Congressional Republicans, White House officials, and Democrats struggled this week to come to terms on a coronavirus, really COVID-19, which is one of many coronaviruses, relief bill. As the U.S. economy reeled from the biggest contraction on record and federal jobless benefits lapsed for nearly 30 million Americans. I heard the numbers up around 56 million unemployed. I'm not sure if that's corroborated data, but I'll interject. That's my interjection. Let's go back. In meetings between White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, and Democrat leaders Nancy Pelosi and Charles Schumer, the two sides traded specific proposals, with Republicans making concessions. Now here I want to interject my opinion that Trump has come forward since all this kind of fell apart and made some statements that take power from Mnuchin, give them a little bit more to Mark Meadows, but really take power away from both of them, trying to get the Republicans and Democrats back to the table. He is talking about $600 going to $400 of relief, $100 of which must be provided by the states. So I'm not sure what that even is saying. He's really just saying $300 from feds. And the states can give $100. He's suggesting it. It's a suggested amount. I'll give you $400, but $100 of that $400 you must get from your brother. And that's my editorial. Sorry. He's also suggesting to federal agencies that they forgive and eliminate evictions as best they can. That's, I think, just simply a proclamation. He's also talking about deferring payroll taxes, which I believe go into the Social Security. That's on a different article and a different video. We'll move on to this video. Going back. So, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said he'd support a bill that included an extension of the $600 a week unemployment benefits, which is bizarre for Mitch McConnell. That goes against his Republican Congress. I'm not sure if that goes against his base even. He's compromising. in hard times. A key point of contention that many in his party oppose. I think that's what I just said. Quote, "We're making progress," unquote, Schumer told reporters. Both he and McConnell said that they were hopeful the basic outlines of a deal could be reached this week and voted on next week, but much remained unresolved. I'm pretty sure it's all fallen through since this information has come to light. Anyway, moving on. Democrats essentially want to renew the $3.4 trillion relief bill the House passed in May, while Senate Republicans are offering $1 trillion with a $200 instead of $600 supplement to unemployment benefits. Now you see that the president's compromised there, offering $300. And moving from $3.4 trillion to $1 trillion in such a dire economic circumstances is a move in the wrong direction. My opinion would be to raise that $3.4 trillion, get the economy back as soon as possible. As soon as possible. The more the time goes by, the worse things will get. People will spend the money. People will stay in their houses and not become homeless, and thereby contribute to the economy. There's many studies that back up what I'm thinking, but we'll move on to more of the article. Democrats want to include billions in aids for cities and states, the Postal Service, which is, of course, another point of contention we'll talk about, I'm sure, in this article. Food assistance, paramount, in my opinion. I'm a bit liberal on that topic. Food assistance. People in America should be able to eat, I think. Child care. Children need supervision. Yes. And election security. I will say no more about that till later probably. While Republicans want a more narrowly focused aid package. The biggest sticking point has been the jobless benefits, which expired last Friday. Democrats are calling for another 6 months of $600 payments, a non-starter for some Republicans who contend that the payments discourage some recipients from going back to work, which is, I think, absolutely legitimate concern. People that are making more money staying home aren't going to go back to work. That makes sense. Whether that causes unemployment or not is a different question. There are other people that would, if those jobs can't be filled, that's a situation that I think calls for further incentive to work. I agree. I have to go with that one. Second quarter GDP numbers revealed an unprecedented 9.5% contraction. Unprecedented 9.5% contraction, or an annual rate of 33%. I believe it's 32.7% actually. As retailers, restaurants, and other businesses closed their doors. Many for good, I should interject. Quote, "Real people are sitting back home and wondering why all the kabuki games. Why can't we just do it?" Unquote, said Senator Marco Rubio, Republican from Florida. So yeah, it's unprecedented in the history of the United States, in my opinion. I'm not sure if there's a period before 1875 or not. This is the worst economic decline in history. There's various reasons for that, which I probably have gone into in other videos. You need to test. You need to isolate. Right? Testing is paramount. Wearing masks, proven to. There's an article out now. Another article proving that masks actually helps you from getting sick. COVID-19 even developing, you can wear a mask, and that is preventative of people getting COVID-19 because the amount of particles, the amount of virus, individual viruses that get into your system is limited by the mask that you wear. How good the mask is, not so important, because any mask prevents some COVID-19 viruses from getting into your system, thereby preventing you from getting. If you got the total number of virus particles into your system, limiting that number helps. That's just a scientific fact. Sorry, I'm editorializing way too much. Going back to the main story, benefits lapse amid a record economic collapse. President Trump, who is not directly participating in the negotiations, repeatedly threatened to issue an executive order, which he did already, to extend jobless benefits and an eviction moratorium if there's no deal. He doesn't have power to do that, but he has recommended the federal agencies that have some power in that scope to do what they can. Quote, "I'll do it myself if I have to," unquote, said Trump. Though whether he has that power is unclear. That statement I can give opinion on. The Constitution states that only Congress has the power to appropriate funding. But once the funding has been appropriated, can the president move the funds around? Can he shift from military spending to pandemic spending? The Supreme Court has made a ruling that seems possible. Anyway, I'm not an expert. These are not opinions of advisors or of any of the people mentioned in these articles. So, what did the editorial say? Congress has, quote, effectively pushed millions of jobless Americans off a cliff, unquote, according to the New York Times, which people are saying has leaned left of late. That's a left statement. Yes, liberals pushed millions of jobless Americans off a cliff. Sounds like they've killed them, sending them to their deaths. And in fact, an argument could be made for that. I don't know about millions, but definitely tens of thousands. For many, the $600 unemployment supplements that lapsed last week are, quote, all that has kept them from going hungry and allowed them to stay in their homes, unquote, not homeless. And that's a true statement. Yet Republicans stalled for months on a new aid package, only to offer people who can't pay rent or buy food, quote, anemic, unquote, help. Anemic is like not enough to survive. Anemic blood flow, you'll die. Okay, so I think I commented on that. We're going to move on to more. This is an article in the Wall Street Journal. The $600, quote, enhancement to unemployment benefits is slowing the recovery. Not sure if that's a true statement. I have to think about that for myself. It doesn't make sense. If they're getting the money, they're spending it, which is good. They're not going back to work, so they're not getting employment, but they're spending the money, which aids the recovery. So I'm not sure that's an iffy statement. Quote, if people make more money by not working, fewer people will work, unquote. That is true. I have to agree with that one. You need to incentivize people to work by giving them enough money that they want to go back to work rather than take the money you're giving them. That would require that the jobs pay more. So we're going to move into a progressive liberal agenda there, where we talk about if $600 incentivize them to stay home, what kind of jobs are out there? That's a low number. That's a low ball. $600. That's like somewhat slightly above $100 a day. Let's say they work 6 days a week. That's $100 a day. That's okay. Sorry. So it goes on. The evidence is clear. In Ohio, some evidence is clear. They should say. That's my editorializing. In Ohio, where jobless workers can pull $904 a week, Honda has had so much trouble staffing an assembly line. It's reassigned office workers, who are well paid probably, to work the line. Sorry, my mind's going. In Kentucky, which is Mitch McConnell's home state, which I know receives more money than it pays in taxes. That's a contentious argument. In Kentucky, where the lowest paid quarter of unemployed workers are now on average receiving checks for more than double their normal pay, labor force participation has dropped 4.8 points since February. There's a lot to unpack in there. There's too much to unpack, really, because what you're saying is that their wages were so low to begin with that they no longer need to work, and that 4.8 points, it's increasing unemployment by paying them to stay home. We're going to leave that at that. Why is Kentucky wages so low? Where is that money going to? Where's the federal money? More coming into Kentucky than leaving Kentucky as far as federal taxes and federal support goes. The federal government gives more money into Kentucky than it takes in taxes, I believe. This is a contentious argument. Where's that money going? Anyway, sorry. More. Now we're going to move on to columnists. What did they say? The notion that people aren't returning to work because of added unemployment benefits is a, quote, myth. This is according to Catherine Rampell in the Washington Post, not the New York Post, Washington Post. 5 separate studies, including ones by researchers at Yale University and the University of Chicago, both extremely respected, top 10, top 20, have, quote, all concluded the same thing. The $600 federal supplement does not appear to have depressed job growth, unquote, and provides needed relief and stimulus. So there may be isolated places and incidents where unemployment benefits have hurt unemployment numbers. That may well be a fact. But overall, what is going on? What is the overall effect? I would argue it's a stimulus package is designed to stimulate the economy. So that's what it does. We do it because so many studies have proven that it does work in times when people are out of work. Giving them money to spend helps the economy. Keeps the economy afloat, etc. I know these studies. Sorry. We're moving on. The reality is, according to Robert Reich, which is one of the economists that I follow, I believe a lot of what he says. I've read some of his books, so I may be a little bit in his cult. But I've been watching him for my entire adult life. He says this in The Guardian. He says a lot of things, which we could get into. But the reality is that, quote, people can't go to work because there's very little work for them to do, unquote. I would also augment that with there's not that much good paying work, obviously, or they would go back to work. If it paid well, they would be back at work, wouldn't they? Okay, so that's according to Robert Reich, he's very left, he's very liberal, he's very progressive in The Guardian. The Guardian often is quoted on NPR, which also leans slightly left. The jobless benefits are actually sustaining the economy, but putting let's read this correctly. The jobless benefits are actually sustaining the economy by putting money, quote, into the pockets of people who spend it, unquote. Without them, millions more jobs will be lost. Boom. I have to say that's a correct statement because you're putting money in pockets of people that are going to spend it. This is people that are out of work, they're going to spend it. Now, are the corporations going to spend it? We saw that they didn't spend it. We saw that they took the money and they just made their coffers higher. Their cash increased. Their cash on the side increased. They didn't spend it. That's a bad thing. Their cash should be going down, not up. Anyway, people out of work are spending the money, putting it back in the economy, which actually keeps jobs afloat and may create jobs. So that's a positive unemployment effect. I should say positive employment effect. I agree with that statement, but again, I'm a bit under Robert Reich's influence, aren't I? He's a great economist. I've very little bad to say about him. I can't think of anything. Again, he leans quite left. He's quite progressive. Sorry. That's my editorializing on his statement. Next, is according to Paul Krugman. Paul Krugman, I believe, advises Donald Trump. I used to be a huge fan of Paul Krugman. I've studied him my whole life. He seems to have swerved right, and currently, amongst the right, he's swerving left. Interesting. This is the New York Times, again, leaning a little bit left. Paul Krugman. I have extremely high opinions of both Paul Krugman and Robert Reich, both absolute geniuses in economics, which was my field of study. Enough about me. The Republicans, quote, disconnect from reality, unquote, on jobless benefits. sorry, let's read this correctly. The Republicans, quote, disconnect from reality, a noun, disconnect from reality, unquote, on jobless benefits has, quote, a long history, unquote. I would agree with that. Going back way before Ronald Reagan, who talks about trickle-down economics, which has been proven in many, 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 many studies to be a myth. Still contentious, though. Okay, moving on. This is the New York Times, of course. For years, they've sold the notion that, quote, jobless are the jobless are moral failures, unquote. Some of that is true. Some are moral failures. They choose not to work. They've decided to take unemployment. They see the benefits of unemployment from a selfish point of view. And there is definitely people gaming the unemployment system. I have to agree with that statement. The jobless are moral failures. All of them? No. Some of them, what percentage? I'd say low percentage. Low percentage are moral failures. Most of them want to work. They want to make more money and take less. I don't know, they'd rather make more than take less. That's my opinion of almost everybody. You have to incentivize them to work, right? The jobs are what's incentivizing people to work. Okay, here we go. The jobless are moral failures who would, quote, rather sit home watching TV than work, unquote. I hate to say this, but everyone, I think almost anyone would, at some point in their lives, rather stay home and watch TV than be forced to work for money. But also, in that statement, I should have to make that people enjoy work. They want to do things for other people. They are intrinsically conserve calorie and conserve calorie burning, but they're also intrinsically social, and they want to help others and work for money to help themselves and their families, to make their lives better. Everyone wants to make their life better, and work is the way you do that. So I don't know if I agree with that statement. Again, fairly true. Somewhat, not much. Okay, moving on. During the Trump years, they've unleashed, I'm not sure if that's the right word, unleashed or unleashed, a relentless, I believe that's a typo. During the Trump years, they've unleashed a relentless assault on programs that help the less fortunate, from Obamacare to food stamps, unquote. Now, that's a leftist statement. Is that true? I could definitely give you a list of the assaults. Moving on. How many of these deficit, quote, hawks took issue, quote, with Trump's $2 trillion tax cut for corporations and the wealthy, unquote. So we've got some serious problem there, right? That's hypocrisy. We have the typical hypocrisy. When it's going to the poor, oh, don't spend it. When it's going to the top, spend it. We need to spend it. It's the Reaganomics, which I believe has been proved over and over and over and over to be a fallacy. Trickle down does not work, did not work, didn't work in Kansas, didn't work in Dakotas. I don't know how to explain that any further. Look up the studies. Look up studies on trickle down economics. Reaganomics doesn't work, doesn't make sense. It's just a fallacy. I can, without compunction, say that trickle-down economics is a fallacy. It's all trickle up. The economy works because there's millions of people spending money, not a few wealthy people finding ways to make jobs. There's importance in that. I agree. There's importance in wealth, creating things, goods and values, and selling them, and creating companies, and creating jobs, creating industries. There's definitely good to that. But the vast economy runs on all the people, 330 million people, spending money and buying those products and working those jobs. That's the economy, not the companies at the top. Companies at the top are international conglomerates, typically. Companies within the economy, I agree. Mom and pops, they're part of the economy. They're part of the U.S. economy. Large companies at the top, they're not even in the U.S. economy. They're outside of it. They're conglomerates looking down upon the U.S. economy as they look down upon all economies, China, Europe, Japan. So that's my opinion, not the opinions of advisors or the opinions given here. Moving on, and then we're going to wrap this up, I think. It's actually Nancy Pelosi, according to Washington Post. It's actually Nancy Pelosi who's betraying struggling Americans, according to the Washington Post. Rather than strike a reasonable compromise on benefits or even pass a temporary extension, she refused to budge, hoping to embarrass Republicans into caving in. Part of her strategy, she argued that you cannot let go of democracy itself. You know, the upcoming election must be maintained. That is not on the negotiation table, and I have to kind of agree with her. I think Americans would say, okay, yeah, I'll suffer a little bit longer with a little bit less money. I would even maybe go homeless to keep democracy in America. Yeah, keep democracy. Fight for democracy, yes. I don't know. That's an argument that can be made later. Further, moving on, Washington Post. Quote, if Republicans capitulate, give in, Democrats win, unquote. Because they'll get credit for the cash windfall even as it slows a recovery that would benefit Trump's reelection. It's all about politics, which is sad, but there's always politics involved, always. If the Republicans refuse to cave and there's no deal, Democrats also win as, quote, the recovery caters and Republicans get the blame, unquote. Fairly true. For Pelosi, quote, defeating Trump is the only thing that matters, regardless of how much pain it causes working Americans working, unquote. I have to disagree with that statement, although the majority of it's true. You can't say only thing that matters. Everything matters to Nancy Pelosi. What she eats this morning matters, right? You can't really say only. I don't like anything I don't like extremes. But in general, yeah, that's her main concern, I think, is defeating Trump, not helping Americans, should I say out loud? But in so doing, I think she's doing what's best in American interests in the long term. So she's keeping the American interest in the long term in her mind when she thinks that beating Trump is possibly more important than, taking a stand against the Republicans regarding continued economic relief for the working classes. She's working for them, so she thinks that's in their best interest, perhaps. It's not the only thing, right? But yeah, it's up. Wait, maybe it's too high on her agenda, and they should be compromising more. I'm not sure. I don't think we can compromise democracy itself. That's my opinion. Sorry. I'm going with democracy. Democracy is more important than, well, people dying is more important, possibly, than democracy. Americans are dying. I think that's paramount. Stop the deaths. Give up a little bit democracy and stop the deaths. I would have to go with that. Hate to be under that gun, though. Final thing we're going to talk about. What next? U.S. business leaders are warning Congress that a, quote, catastrophic number, quote, unquote, of business failures could be imminent. Coming up any moment, according to NBCnews.com, left-leaning. Quote, by Labor Day, we foresee a wave of permanent closures if the right steps are not taken soon, unquote. By Labor Day, we foresee a wave of permanent foreclosures if the right steps are not taken soon, unquote. Wrote more than 100 chief executives from firms including Facebook, Starbucks, Microsoft, and Disney in a joint letter to congressional leaders. That's amazing, right? By Labor Day, this is according to 100 chief executives. Quote, by Labor Day, we foresee a wave of permanent foreclosures if the right steps are not taken soon. So here's my other argument about them taking advantage. The large companies, they're taking advantage of the situation, but they're now actually turning around and saying, please don't let this happen. So it would be in their best interest if the small companies went out of business. Would it be? We don't know. I think Reich and Krugman would argue, no, these small businesses actually support the bigger businesses in some intricate way, which no one can truly understand. But they're They're all necessary. All the layers necessary. Interesting that they would come out and say this to me. They seek measures including another round of federally guaranteed business loans. That sounds a little self-serving, but okay. With loan forgiveness for the worst hit companies. Would they try to get in that group of worst hit companies? Like, who are we talking about? We're not talking about Kodak. We're talking about, I'll think of the companies that were worst hit, that weren't so needy, in my opinion. Okay. Quote, the devastated restaurant industry, quote, is looking for a bailout as well, according to Texas Monthly. It's, quote, clinging to what those in the business say is their last best hope, unquote, for survival. A $120 billion relief bill for restaurants introduced in Congress in June. It's been months. A national coalition of chefs and owners is leading a lobbying effort in behalf of the bill, saying 16 million jobs are at stake. Many restaurateurs, quote, are just holding on to see if this relief effort has legs, unquote, said Austin chef Kevin Fink. Now this I have to wholeheartedly agree with. If you don't support the restaurant industry, it will die. Will it come back? Yeah, but extremely slowly. So the major chains like McDonald's, they're jamming. They're loving this. I don't know if they're mentioned here. Well, they talk about Starbucks. Starbucks is in direct competition with mom and pops and restaurants in a way, right? In a way, I am all for supporting mom and pops, which is most restaurants and most small chain restaurants. They're basically mom and pops, and they employ a lot of people, and they're a very important part of the economy. Is it slightly frivolous, like the entertainment industry? Yes, it's frivolous. Is it necessary? It feeds people. It keeps people working. Obviously not absolutely essential, is it? A lot of things in our economy are not essential, like the entire dessert industry. Do we need dessert? We don't need it. Is it a good thing to have? Not sure. I'm not sure I can speak to that. Is it a good thing to keep mom and pops alive? Absolutely. Absolutely. Keep the mom and pops alive. Keep the small business owners striving to make their businesses bigger and to develop new industries. Entire new industries are developed from small businesses. So small business, very important. All interesting stuff to me. I'm sorry if I edit